My brother's fiancée falsely accused me of getting her pregnant. My family believed her without hesitation. I fought back and took her to court. The truth finally came out. And now my brother wants to reconcile. And before getting into the story, I asked viewers for support because the channel has been losing traction. Subscribing really helps. It's free, quick, and means a lot to us. Thanks for sticking around. Now onto the story. Because this one is seriously messed up. My brother got engaged to a woman who turned out to be a complete nightmare, and after my mom and brother pushed me, I hired her at my small computer repair shop, thinking it would be temporary. But just a few weeks later I had to fire her for being rude, lazy, and incompetent, and her response was to tell everyone that I got her pregnant, which was an outright lie. Yet my family believed her instantly. My brother even fought me and said I was dead to him. So here's what actually happened. I'm a 35-year-old guy who runs a small computer repair shop in town. I make a decent living, pay my taxes, keep my head down, and live a pretty boring, normal life, or at least I thought it was boring enough not to make me a target. But I was wrong. My older brother Raphael, 38, always seemed like the put-together one. Married young, divorced without drama, steady life, and about 3 years ago he introduced us to Marina, 32, his new girlfriend, who seemed calm and friendly on the surface but immediately gave me a bad feeling. From the first awkward dinner at my mom's house I noticed how she dominated conversations, redirected everything back to herself, and delivered subtle insults disguised as compliments. Like telling my mom how brave it was that she still cooked traditional dishes at her age, or telling my cousin how courageous it was to wear certain colors with her skin tone. While everyone else bought into her act, I stayed neutral, didn't fake excitement, didn't pretend we were suddenly family. And I think that's when I landed on her radar, because Marina always had an angle. Whenever someone talked about their problems, she somehow made it about herself. Even with strangers there was this competitive edge. And I once watched her argue with a teenage cashier over a $2 coupon for 20 minutes until the kid almost cried. A few months later Raphael announced they were engaged, and my dad quietly pulled me aside and warned me that this woman would bring trouble. But it wasn't our place to interfere, until Raphael asked me to give Marina a part-time job at my shop while she planned the wedding. I hesitated. My mom insisted that family helps family. Raphael accused me of being difficult. Even said I owed him for referring business to me last year, and against my better judgment I agreed, which turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. Because from day one Marina was a nightmare employee. She showed up late, talked down to customers, treated my staff like servants, constantly interrupted my lead technician Kevin with wrong technical advice, deleted a customer database we were supposed to recover and blamed confusing procedures, secretly changed schedules to give herself easy shifts, wrecked inventory counts so badly we ordered double the RAM we needed, brushed it off by saying her finance brain worked differently than my technical one, stayed glued to her phone and hid it when I walked by, and I even caught her scrolling Instagram while an older customer explained how important recovering photos from his late wife's laptop was. And the final straw came when I caught her snooping through private conversations on a customer's unformatted computer, belonging to a local doctor, when those messages could have contained confidential patient information, putting my entire business at legal risk. And when I confronted her, she just smiled and said it was part of her natural curiosity, showing zero shame or understanding of the damage she was causing. When I explained how serious it was, she just rolled her eyes and said, "Nobody's going to sue you, don't be so uptight." And after a full month of dealing with that kind of crap, I fired her, calmly and professionally, documenting everything and even showing Raphael the evidence. And at first he seemed to understand. But later that night he called back after clearly talking to Marina, and his entire tone had changed, telling me I hadn't given her a chance and that she was really upset about how I treated her. And when I reminded him I'd given her plenty of chances and documented every incident, he snapped back with "Yeah, sure." Accused me of always thinking I knew everything, acting too good to help my own family, and ended it with "She's going to be my wife and you pull this. Screw you, man." And that's when things got weird, because at family gatherings Marina either ignored me completely or made subtle passive-aggressive comments no one else seemed to catch. Then her behavior shifted again and she started finding reasons to be alone with me, brushing past me, making suggestive remarks just quiet enough for me to hear, and I kept my distance without being rude, until one Labor Day barbecue when she cornered me alone in the kitchen, stood too close, asked if I was still angry, and ran her hand down my arm, and I stepped back, told her we were fine and that I needed to help my dad at the grill, and got out. But I noticed her watching me the rest of the day. with this strange smirk, and after that everything went to hell. Because 3 months ago my shop door slammed open during closing time and Raphael stormed in screaming that I was dead, shouting loud enough that Kevin ran out from the back, accusing me of getting Marina pregnant. And for several seconds I couldn't even speak before telling him he was out of his mind and that I'd never touched her, never had any kind of relationship with her. But he didn't believe me, lunged across the counter, grabbed my shirt, and had to be dragged away by Kevin while snarling that Marina had given him dates and details that lined up and he couldn't see her lying. And within days my name was mud. My mom crying on the phone about how I'd betrayed the family. My cousin Valeria sending a 3-paragraph text saying she'd always known something was off about me and that I was lucky Marina wasn't pressing charges. My Uncle Dave calling to say I was shameless and disgusting for taking advantage of my brother's fiancée, my aunt uninviting me from family dinner, everyone avoiding the monster I'd supposedly become, except my dad, who called immediately and said Marina had been looking for trouble from day one and that we were going to fight this. Because not a single other person asked for evidence or questioned her story. They just accepted her word as truth while she walked around smug and victorious, knowing she had me cornered. But that was only the beginning, because I wasn't about to bow my head and take it, and 2 weeks after her accusation things got even worse as the story spread beyond family to neighbors, co-workers, and people at the gym, and in a town this size word travels fast, turning me into the quiet computer guy who turned out to be a predator. And I felt it immediately when the barista who used to chat went silent. The hardware store owner I'd known for 7 years hid in the back. My business took a hit with 3 regular clients canceling contracts in the same week with vague excuses. A tech startup cutting me off entirely, and even a guy I used to play basketball with switching to a shop 30 minutes away. While Raphael cut me off completely and ignored my demand for a DNA test, his silence heavy and condemning, and my mother finally calling one night with a shaking voice to ask if it was possible I'd done something to Marina. That was the moment it really sank in how deep this had gone, because even my own mother, who had known me my entire life, had allowed doubt to creep in, and when she asked if it was possible, I said, "Mom, I've never even been alone with her except at the shop with employees and customers around. You know me, do you really think I'd do this?" And she hesitated before answering, and that hesitation said everything. While my dad was the one steady thing through all of it, telling me my brother had been blind since the day he met Marina and that my mother had always sided with him, always had, and he helped me start documenting everything and building a case. Because at the same time Marina was playing her role with disturbing precision, adding new details to her story about how I'd been understanding while she was emotionally confused, how I'd manipulated her with sweet words, how I tried to pressure her into an abortion and then threatened to ruin her socially when she refused. Telling this version with tears in her eyes to Raphael, to my mother, to my aunt who even called to say she was horrified by what she'd heard. All while there was still no medical proof at all, no documents, no confirmation, just claims, and Marina refused a DNA test 3 times, saying it would be risky for the fetus and that she needed emotional stability instead of a hostile environment. Which is when I started to realize this wasn't just about attacking me but about control, attention, money, or maybe the sick satisfaction of destroying someone's life. Because this wasn't drama anymore, it was premeditated reputation destruction, and Kevin was the only employee who stuck by me, telling me he saw how she acted, how she always tried to get me alone, touched my arm, leaned in too close when she thought no one was watching, and swearing he'd tell anyone who asked that she was full of crap. And at my dad's suggestion I agreed to try talking to Raphael one last time, meeting him at a diner, which turned out to be a huge mistake because he showed up already wound tight, eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept, demanding I just admit what I'd done. And when I looked him straight in the eye and told him I'd never touched Marina and that she was lying and he was too blind to see it, he exploded, knocked his chair over as he stood up, leaned across the table while people stared, hissed that I was dead to him, and stormed out. And that night I called a lawyer who specializes in defamation, who listened for nearly an hour before telling me this wouldn't stop on its own and that if I didn't fight it, people would remember her words, not my silence, which hit hard because the worst part wasn't even the lie but the abandonment. The way my brother and my mother chose the comfort of believing it over the discomfort of questioning it. But I knew then this wasn't going to end how Marina expected, because I was going to force every single one of them to face the truth. And I wouldn't hesitate to collect on every betrayal when it happened. And a month into this nightmare things somehow got even more twisted, with every morning feeling like I was on trial in some invisible court that needed no evidence, just rumors, as Marina's story kept growing more elaborate, now claiming she visited my shop after hours, that we stayed alone late, that I bought her food as an excuse to get close, that I offered her money for silence and forced her to delete threatening messages. Telling it all with such conviction it was almost impressive, because she wasn't confused or hurt. She was a calculated performer enjoying the chaos she'd created, even getting specific about supposed encounters in the back storage room during my shop's Christmas party, which was an obvious lie since I've never had a Christmas party there. Just gift cards and an extra day off. But Raphael was too far gone to notice the holes, and the damage to my daily life was brutal, losing 3 major contracts with clients who suddenly didn't want to be associated with anything risky, watching my reputation turn from an asset into a liability, and finally seeing my largest corporate client, a medical practice with 4 locations, cancel their $4,000 monthly contract overnight. With the office manager I'd worked with for 3 years unable to even meet my eyes as she said it wasn't personal, it was just optics. Optics, like I'm some PR problem instead of a human being whose life is being systematically dismantled by lies, and it hit even harder when the diner where I've had breakfast every Saturday for 5 years suddenly felt hostile. The owner who used to talk sports and politics with me wouldn't meet my eyes, just set my coffee down and vanished into the kitchen. And that's when it really sank in that the accusation had taken root. Because you don't need proof to feel it. You see it in the averted gazes, the closed doors, the conversations that die the second you walk into a room, while Marina, meanwhile, started posting passive-aggressive garbage on social media, never naming me directly but using lines like, "When monsters have the face of an angel and justice comes in the form of a child," with people piling on supportive comments, unaware they're participating in a public lynching, forcing me to screenshot everything because my lawyer says we need to show a clear pattern of defamation. How she's deliberately farming sympathy while burning my reputation to the ground, and it's surreal watching her spin this elaborate fantasy knowing the truth and still being powerless to make anyone believe it. Especially since she's cast herself not just as a victim but as some kind of martyr, and no one, not a single person besides my dad and Kevin, has demanded proof, because apparently the presumption of innocence doesn't apply to me. Though my best friend Roberto has been solid through all of this, knowing me since high school and calling bullshit immediately, reminding me over burgers at his place, the only place besides my apartment where I felt safe, about Jen Miller from senior year and how she pulled the same manipulative routine, different story, same playbook, insisting Marina would slip up and that would be ready, and the only real progress has been through my lawyer, who's helped me systematically document everything from the day Marina started working at my shop, Kevin providing a written statement about her inappropriate behavior toward me, other employees detailing her incompetence and unprofessional conduct, and even tracking down Marina's previous employers, uncovering that this wasn't her first rodeo, that she'd left a marketing firm in the next county under vague circumstances, with her former supervisor eventually admitting there had been concerns about her interactions with colleagues and her professional conduct. Nothing concrete enough to act on but enough to establish a pattern, while we also started the long legal process to force a DNA test once the pregnancy is far enough along to pose no risk, navigating protocols, timelines, and agencies that don't share my urgency. But it's a path to the truth and that's what keeps me going. So I document everything obsessively, dates, names, behaviors, exact words, with my dad helping by talking to people who know Marina and poking holes in her story. Until things went from bad to worse one night when I was closing up the shop and Raphael pulled into the parking lot clearly drunk, moving aggressive and unsteady, prompting me to lock the door as he started pounding on the glass and screaming for me to come out. And just as I was about to call the cops he grabbed a brick from the landscaping and hurled it through my front window, glass exploding everywhere as he climbed through, cutting himself and charging at me, and I'm not proud of what followed but it was self-defense. I sidestepped, he crashed into a display case, got back up, and I hit him once. Clean, right in the jaw, dropping him hard. Neighbors calling the police who arrived 5 minutes later, took statements, documented the damage, and arrested Raphael for destruction of property and attempted assault. And this time I pressed charges because I was done letting him off the hook, which led to my mother calling me sobbing, asking how I could do this to my own brother and accusing me of sending him to jail, cutting me off when I tried to explain he'd attacked me, telling me she didn't have a son who would do this before hanging up, while my dad arrived as Raphael was loaded into the squad car, quietly asking if I was okay, telling me I did the right thing and that Raphael needed consequences even if he was still my brother, something that didn't feel true anymore, And as we watched the car drive away, my dad said this ends now and that tomorrow we push harder for the test. Though I'm not naive enough to believe a DNA result will magically fix everything, because even when it proves I'm not the father, I know some people will still cling to the idea that where there's smoke, there must be fire. I may never get back everything I've lost, but I'm not going to let Marina walk away from this, because she may have won the first round, but I have the patience, resources, and resolve to meet her on her own ground, and what she did wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. It was deliberate, destructive slander, and I fully intend to return every blow in a way that's surgical, precise, legal, and final. Because 3 months into this nightmare, my life has turned into an emotional wasteland, where every day feels like a repeat of the last, waking up, going through the motions, living under constant suspicion for something I never did. My routines now stripped of feeling. My isolation so deep I sometimes wonder if I'll ever climb out. My business down nearly 70%. Most days sitting alone in the shop while Kevin handles the few repairs that still come in. Burning through my savings just to keep the lights on. Realizing this isn't just an attack on my reputation but on my ability to survive. Taking back roads to work to avoid familiar faces. Exhausted by the judgment I see in people's eyes. Overhearing a customer whisper to Kevin asking if I still owned the shop. Staying hidden in the back room even though Kevin defended me. And then today, finally, something shifted. The darkness easing as the truth, real and provable, punched through the wall of lies. Because after weeks of legal fighting, we finally got the test I'd demanded from the start. A court-ordered prenatal paternity test that posed no risk to the fetus, despite Marina's lawyer trying every delay tactic imaginable, claiming emotional instability, irreversible harm, and protecting the victim from pressure, until media attention forced the judge's hand. And the procedure was done under legal supervision at a private clinic, where Marina walked in without fear or shame, only irritation. Chin high like I wasn't worth acknowledging, until I saw that brief moment when her mask slipped and panic flashed in her eyes, because she already knew what the results would say, and the 2 weeks waiting nearly broke me, barely sleeping, staring at my phone, until the report finally came back and I just sat there staring at the page, probability of paternity 0%. That 0 becoming my redemption. Proof that everything I'd suffered came from a calculated lie by someone who underestimated how far I'd go. My lawyer sending the results to Raphael the same day, followed by 3 days of complete silence before he finally texted, saying only that he needed time and we'd talk later. No apology, no accountability, nothing but a hollow message that hardened my resolve even more. And then it got worse for her, because my lawyer uncovered inconsistencies in the medical documents she'd provided, altered dates, fake doctors, formats that didn't match the clinics listed. And when we checked with the clinic that handled the DNA test, they had no prior record of Marina at all, no visits, no exams, no prescriptions, nothing, leading my lawyer to say out loud what I'd already started to suspect, that Marina had never been pregnant. Something that stunned me not because I trusted her, but because it was almost impossible to believe someone would fabricate a pregnancy, falsify records, and maintain the lie for months just to destroy someone's life over being fired from a part-time job and rejected. Yet the evidence was undeniable, proving Marina wasn't just a liar but a pathological manipulator with a history of destruction. And once my lawyer dug deeper, a familiar pattern from her past began to emerge. She'd pulled similar stunts in 2 past relationships, never quite this extreme, but close enough to reveal a pattern. Ex-boyfriends suddenly accused of stalking, harassment, emotional abuse, one nearly losing his teaching job after she made false claims to his principal. Only saved because she got sloppy and security footage proved he was nowhere near where she said the incident happened, and we brought everything to the judge, the DNA results, the irregular medical documents, the threatening messages, and testimonies from people who were finally starting to question her story. Kevin testifying that he'd seen Marina make advances toward me multiple times and get angry when I didn't respond. Roberto submitting screenshots of contradictory social media posts she'd made about her pregnancy. And slowly the house of cards began to collapse, not with drama, but with the inevitable groan of a lie that can't support its own weight. And for the first time in months I could sleep without feeling that knife in my back, because the truth gave me back my voice, my name, my dignity. And now that I had those again, I was moving toward what I'd been waiting for, making her pay, because if she thought this ended with a negative test result, she was dead wrong. This was only the beginning. And 4 months after the first lie the atmosphere shifted. not calming, but transforming, moving from accusations and threats to a quiet retreat as people tried to hide their shame instead of fixing what they'd helped destroy. The truth didn't bring comfort. It exposed every rotten seam in the family, loyalties that shattered under pressure, betrayals disguised as neutrality, and now with the DNA results official and the fake medical documents exposed, new rumors began circulating. Family members suggesting Marina was confused, emotionally unstable, maybe mentally unwell, anything to soften what she'd done. Yet not one person except my dad, Kevin, and Roberto offered me a direct apology, because shame turned them into cowards, and it was easier to invent excuses than admit they'd condemned an innocent man they'd known his entire life. My aunt, the same one who uninvited me from family dinner, even told my dad we all needed to move past this as a family, like it was some trivial disagreement, and couldn't even say it to my face, while my cousin Valeria, who sent me that 3-paragraph condemnation, now acted like nothing happened, casually inviting me to her kid's birthday party without acknowledging a thing. No apology, just the bizarre pretense that we were still on normal terms. And then Raphael finally resurfaced, not how I expected, showing up at my apartment looking pale and wrecked, unable to meet my eyes as he told me Marina had confessed. No pregnancy, no relationship, all of it fabricated because she was furious I'd fired her and wanted to make me pay. And he spoke like a broken man, but I felt no sympathy, because realizing a grown woman could fake a pregnancy, forge documents, lie for months, and nearly destroy a family out of pure spite ignited a cold fury in me that left no room for anger, just silence. And when he said he didn't know what to say and understood if I never wanted to see him again, I simply told him to get out, stopping him when he tried to speak again and repeating it. And he left without another word. And the next day Marina messaged me directly for the first time. No apology, no guilt, just claiming things got out of control and she was emotionally overwhelmed, asking me to withdraw the lawsuit for Raphael's sake. And I had to reread it just to process the audacity. This woman who defamed me, fueled the lie, and encouraged a public lynching now asking for mercy. So I didn't respond. I met my lawyer instead and told him to proceed with the defamation, document forgery, and moral damages lawsuit, calculating the losses, the contracts I'd lost, the equipment I'd sold to survive, the reputation damage that would take years to repair, totaling over $200,000 in direct losses alone, not counting future impact or emotional harm, because this stopped being about clearing my name a long time ago that's already happening. Because this isn't just about me anymore, it's about setting a precedent, about Marina and everyone who took part in this lie understanding that words carry consequences, that actions have weight, and that no one has the right to destroy another person's life out of anger, envy, or resentment. And some people might call that vindictive, but I call it justice, because I don't care if it's slow or if the punishment feels mild. What I want is a record, something official that clearly states I was defamed, that lies were told about me, that I was persecuted without cause, something Marina will have to face every time she applies for a job, something that stands in direct contradiction to her whispered version of events, and something Raphael will live with knowing his blind faith turned his own brother into a pariah. Because this isn't impulsive revenge, it's deliberate justice, a repair that doesn't scream but establishes facts. And 6 months after that poison dart was thrown, looking back at the emotional chaos, the losses, the isolation caused by a carefully crafted lie, I can say the truth has not only been legally recognized but has had real consequences, with justice delivered through evidence, cross-examinations, forensic analysis, and testimony that dismantled Marina's story piece by piece. The final hearing closing this chapter last week, though court rulings don't magically heal betrayal, they just force accountability, and that day was unforgettable not because of drama but because everyone involved was finally in one room with nowhere to hide. Marina arriving dressed in calculated sobriety, her composure cracking as evidence was presented, falsified documents, ultrasounds belonging to other patients, forged records, pregnancy certificates from clinics that didn't exist, so crude and grotesque that even her lawyer could only ask for clemency, citing emotional distress and temporary instability, until the prosecution presented clinic records cross-referenced with her documents, timestamp inconsistencies, and metadata from the PDFs she submitted, at which point her attorney fell silent, requested a recess, and returned to acknowledge that the documents were forged and that no pregnancy had ever existed, a defeat without theatrics, while Raphael sat through it all growing paler by the minute without once looking at me, My mother absent. Claiming illness that my dad later admitted was shame. My dad sitting behind me the entire time, steady and unmovable, Kevin and Roberto on either side of me. The only people besides my father who believed me from the beginning. And when the judge read the ruling and my dad placed his hand on my shoulder, it meant more than words ever could. Because the decision was clear. Marina was guilty of aggravated defamation, document forgery, and moral damages, ordered to pay a substantial fine over several years and barred from contacting me for at least 3 years. Not a prison sentence, not what I wanted, but an official ruling validating everything I said from day one, restoring at least part of the dignity stripped from me by someone who played the victim without caring who she destroyed. And the judge also ordered her to post a public retraction on the same platforms where she spread the lies, explicitly stating within 24 hours that she falsely accused me, that there was never any relationship, and that the pregnancy was entirely fabricated. And since that ruling, I've started receiving messages from relatives who once turned their backs on me, offering vague explanations about confusion or staying neutral, careful words that still stop short of owning what they did. Others chose silence, hoping time would wash away their part in it, while Raphael kept calling again and again until I blocked his number because whatever he wanted to say no longer mattered to me. Since the brother I once knew would never have believed those lies, would never have tried to physically hurt me, and would never have walked away when I needed him most. My mother left a tearful voicemail begging me to talk to her, but I still haven't called back because some betrayals cut too deep to be repaired with tears or apologies, and now a full year has passed and my business hasn't just survived, it's grown. Though it didn't happen fast, and for months I worked on a half-dead schedule, scraping by on part-time repair jobs and one loyal client who ignored the rumors, knowing silence wouldn't clear my name. So I did what I do best and fixed things myself by posting the court verdict and my full story on the business website, pinning it to our Google reviews, and letting the evidence speak for itself, which brought back one major client after their legal team reviewed the ruling, and that single contract covered 2 months of operating costs. Because I didn't beg for trust, I rebuilt it piece by piece, then hired 2 part-time employees and moved into a larger location across town as the ruling became public record and the truth slowly replaced the lies. And through my dad I heard that Raphael and Marina divorced not long after the trial, the public humiliation apparently breaking what they had, with Raphael moving to another state for work or maybe just to escape. Either way, better for both of us. Though he tried reaching out again last month with a handwritten letter saying he wanted to make amends, claiming he'd been blinded by love and manipulated by a professional liar and that he missed his brother and wanted to rebuild our relationship. A letter I burned before finishing because some bridges should stay burned. While my mother and I exist in an uneasy truce where we see each other at holidays and exchange polite words, but the warmth is gone since she chose sides when it mattered, and that's not something I can forget even if I've technically forgiven her. Whereas my dad and I are closer than ever because he never doubted me and stood by me when it counted. And now we have dinner every Sunday, a new tradition born from the ashes of the old family dynamic. Kevin earned a promotion to shop manager by staying loyal when it would have been easier to walk away. Roberto and I still meet for drinks every week with a friendship strengthened by the storm. And Marina moved across the country after missing the first 3 fine payments, which my lawyer says is common because people think they can outrun judgments by relocating, not realizing we were ready and filed to enforce it in her new state. And when a few anonymous negative reviews appeared on my business profile shortly after she moved with the same writing style and odd punctuation, we flagged them and built a digital paper trail, ready to nail her for harassment if she keeps playing games. Because while the truth set me free, it didn't restore everything I lost, with some friends never returning, some family ties still strained or broken, and some clients still choosing to believe whispers. But I rebuilt something stronger from the wreckage, a business independent of family connections and friendships forged in fire. And while people say revenge is best served cold, I don't agree. Because real justice isn't revenge at all, it's restoration, and that's what I got. Not perfect and not complete, but enough to look at myself in the mirror each morning knowing that when they tried to bury me, I refused to become a grave and instead became exactly what they feared most. Someone who wouldn't stay silent. So Reddit, do you think Raphael deserves a second chance? Was cutting him off the right choice? Because I've tried seeing it from his side, but damn it, he believed a lie over his own brother. And that's not something you just recover from. And anyway, thanks for reading this far. How would you handle it if you were in my place?